steel glowed orange under her boots, and Myra did not look down. 6 seconds. That was how long Overseer Kalen's sensors said the exposed gantry could hold a body before the plasma stripped it to bone. She had been standing on it twice as long. Behind the reinforced glass, Kalen pressed both hands flat against the console and watched the girl from observation post-prime walk into a Class 10 plasma storm like it was light rain. 67 cadets were sealed in the shelter behind him. Every shield reading on his board said the same word, over and over, dead. Her hand tapped once against her thigh, then again. The rhythm matched a flicker on his display that had no business matching anything. The storm gave no warning, no countdown, no mercy. It only grew, and Myra walked closer to its heart, and Kalen's throat plates flared hot with a fear he did not have a name for. I've watched 1,000 storms break steel. I had never watched one get outweighted, not until her. 3 days earlier, the observation deck had smelled like cold metal and recycled air. Myra sat cross-legged on the floor with a grease-stained notebook open on her knee, tapping her stylus against the page in short, even beats. "There's a ripple," she said, sliding the notebook across the console toward Kalen. "Every 12 minutes. It's not noise, it's breathing." Kalen barely glanced at the hand-drawn lines. Coalition sensors covered every wavelength a storm could throw. A human scribbling with a pencil was not going to outsee them. "Log it as thermal drift," he told the junior officer beside him, and turned back to the true data, the clean data, the kind that came from machines that did not guess. Myra did not argue. She closed the notebook and went back to tapping the same rhythm against her knee, over and over, like she was keeping time with something only she could hear. Jax leaned over from the next station, mandibles clicking in the low, dry way that meant he was thinking. For what it's worth, her ripple lines up with the last 3 drift readings, might be worth a second look. "It lines up because drift always looks the same," Kalen said. "Coincidence isn't a pattern." Lurie said nothing, but her skin shifted a shade paler, the way it did whenever an argument went on too long near her station. She kept working, logging the routine checks nobody thought would matter in a few hours. The storm hit the station 4 hours later, and it did not knock politely. Alarms tore through observation post-prime in a rising shriek. The outer shield lit up on the main board, a wall of light holding back a wall of fire, and for a moment it held. Then the plating over the east relay buckled, and the light went out in a long, dying flicker. "Shield integrity failing on Section 3, Jax barked, all 4 arms moving across separate panels at once. "Automated systems are compensating, but the load's climbing faster than the compensation." Kalen slammed his palm on the override, rerouting power from the labs to the shield grid. "Hold the line. Get me a channel to the shelter now." Lurie's photoreceptive skin had gone pale gray, the color draining the way it did under any sudden light shift. She didn't freeze. She grabbed the emergency latch and sealed the lab hatch herself, one motion, no hesitation. "Cadets are locked in. Bunker protocol is active." For a moment it looked like it would be enough. The shield held at half strength, flickering but standing, and Kalen let himself think they might ride this one out the ordinary way, the way every storm before it had been ridden out. Then the sensors screamed and went silent all at once, like a throat cut mid-word. Every screen on the deck dropped to static. The AI's calm voice, the one that had guided Kalen through 6 tours of duty, sputtered into a loop of broken syllables and then nothing at all. The station's eyes and ears were gone, and the storm outside kept climbing. Kalen's skin flared hot, a wash of heat rolling down his arms before he could stop it. He shoved the feeling down and slapped the comm panel. "Bring the backup array online. Now." "There is no backup array," Jax said. "Not one that talks to a dead relay." "There's a manual one." Myra was already standing, the notebook clutched in one fist, her stylus still tucked behind her ear. The relay hub has a hand crank breaker behind the main panel, coalition standard. Nobody's touched it in years because nobody needed to. That hub is outside the shield line, Kalen said. You would not survive the walk to the hatch. I've survived worse than a walk. Myra was already moving toward the airlock, boots hitting the deck in the same rhythm her stylus had tapped 3 hours earlier. The storm's not random. It pulses. I've been charting it since the ripple started. There's a gap in it and it's coming. That is not data, that is a guess. It's the only guess anybody's got left. Jack stepped between her and the airlock controls for half a second, then dropped his arm and stepped aside instead. If she's right, this is the only shot we get. If she's wrong, we lose her and we're no worse off than we already are. Kalen reached for the comm to order her back, to override the airlock, to do anything that would stop a 19-year-old cadet from walking into a storm that had already swallowed every reading his station owned. The channel connected, then dropped, then connected again, garbled past understanding. His hand hovered over the manual lockout. He did not press it. He told himself later it was because there was no time. He never fully believed that. The airlock cycled, and Myra stepped out into the fire. She moved along the gantry in short bursts, pausing at each flare the way someone pauses at a red light, then crossing the gaps the instant the light died down. Her notebook was tucked against her ribs, soaked through, the ink already running. She didn't need to read it anymore. She had the rhythm memorized. A support strut behind her buckled and dropped into the storm below, gone in a flash of white before it even hit the lower deck. She didn't turn around. She counted under her breath and kept walking. Behind the glass, Kalen watched the readouts climb past every threshold his people had ever built a ship to survive. The plasma density spiked into numbers his instruments weren't rated to measure, and still she walked, counting under her breath, tapping 2 fingers against her leg between each step. This was the moment his whole doctrine came apart. Every simulation, every coalition standard shield, every layer of tech his species had spent generations perfecting, and none of it was steering this crisis. A single human girl with a wet notebook was reading a monster his sensors couldn't even see anymore, and she was reading it right. Jax's voice cracked over the dying comm line. She's at the halfway mark. Overseer, she's not slowing down. Kalen said nothing. He gripped the edge of the console hard enough that the metal groaned, and for the first time in his career, he had no order left to give. The relay hub door was scorched black, its handle hot enough to bite through her glove. Myra didn't flinch. She yanked it open and dropped to her knees in front of the manual breaker, a simple lever behind a cracked panel, exactly where the old station schematics said it would be. She reached, she struck, she held. The lever screamed against rusted housing and gave. Somewhere deep in the station's bones, the shield grid shuddered, gasped, and rose again, 1 bar of light climbing back across the main board like a held breath finally released. The plasma outside the gantry hissed against the restored field and slid off it, harmless, for the first time in what felt like hours. The station's AI stuttered back online mid-diagnostic, and its calm voice cracked with something almost like confusion. Error. Manual override detected on relay circuit not rated for external contact during Class 10 conditions. Survival probability for this action, 0.3%. Cannot reconcile outcome with current model. Kalen stared at the words on the screen. The machine that had never once been wrong in 6 tour, had just admitted it, had no idea what it was looking at. Jax broke the silence first, his voice unsteady in a way Kalen had never heard from him. She's still moving, she's coming back in. Kalen didn't answer. His skin was radiating heat again, stronger than before, and this time he let it. Myra came through the airlock soaked, singed at the sleeve, notebook ruined beyond reading. She peeled off 1 glove, looked around at the shocked faces on the deck, and said the only thing on her mind. Is there any nutrient paste left? I skipped lunch. Nobody laughed, nobody could. Luri was the first to move, pulling a ration pack from the shelf without being asked and pressing it into Myra's hands. Her skin had gone back to its normal green, the fear pale gone as fast as it had come. "You walked through a storm for a hand crank," she said, "and you're worried about lunch." "Crisis makes me hungry," Myra said, already tearing the pack open. "Always has." Kaelin picked up the ruined notebook from where she'd set it on the console. The pages had bled together into gray smears, but he could still make out the shapes of her charts underneath, rows of ripples she had tracked for hours while his sensors called it noise. He carried it to the station archive himself and sealed it inside a display case meant for artifacts, not scrap paper. Later, someone would relabel it Predictive Survival Doctrine and mount it where every new cadet would walk past it on their first day. Kaelin stood in front of the case a long time after the others had gone. Outside, the storm had finally passed, and the corridor lights hummed steady over the glass. He thought about the readout that had called her survival a fraction of a percent, and the way her heart rate, when they finally checked the logs, had never once spiked above resting. To her it had not been heroics, it had been chores. He did not know what else these small, unremarkable creatures called routine, and he was no longer sure he wanted to find out. The archive light clicked off behind him, leaving the notebook glowing faintly in the dark, and the corridor beyond it silent, waiting for the next storm no one would see coming.